Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the May Cabinet meeting. My name is Councillor Millie Owen. I'm the leader of the council, and I'll be chairing this meeting today. My deputy, Councillor Mike Cox, is sitting next to me. I'd like to welcome the members of the public who are here today or online who are listening in, and also welcome cabinet members, councillors, and officers. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Democratic Services to go over the housekeeping for today's meeting. Sarah.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by where the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to agenda item 1, which is apologies. We have received apologies from Councillor Rich Herrett, and everyone else is here and in the room. Agenda item 2 are declarations of interest. None have been received. If any members of Cabinet do realise they have one to declare, then please do raise it during that item. So moving on to agenda item 3, which is the confirmation of minutes from our last meeting of Cabinet, which was on the 2nd of April 2025. Do we have someone to propose this item to accept the minutes?
I'm quite happy to, Leader, just with one small amendment. Councillor Cox and Hannah, I believe, gave apologies to the last meeting. Councillor Hannah was marked as present.
Thank you. That's very well spotted. Thanks, Richard.
I was doing something much more important.
Is there someone to second the minutes?
Yes, I'd like to second.
Thank
Leader,
you.
with the amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. So if we adopt that amendment, can I see if there is unanimous agreement that everything is fine on those? Thank you. That is accepted. Okay, so we're going to go to agenda item 4, which is public issues. We haven't had any petitions, questions or statements submitted on this occasion. Agenda item 5 is the recommendations from overview and scrutiny committees that are not otherwise on the agenda. However, before we go into these, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Councillor Stephen Bartlett, who has stepped down from Overview and Scrutiny Board recently. Steve has been a strong figure in BCP Council since its formation as a member of the board and then as chair, and has been a fantastic advocate for the importance of role that scrutiny plays in the democratic process, making and ensuring that Cabinet and the wider council are accountable for what they do. I think colleagues will agree with me that we have appreciated his contributions to Cabinet over the years. I'd also like to welcome to Cabinet the new chair of Overview and Scrutiny Board, which is Councillor Kate Salmon. Congratulations, Kate, on your election last night. Can I ask you if you have any items to report that are not otherwise on the agenda today?
Hello, thank you very much, Chair. And yes, can I just echo what you just said about Councillor Bartlett as well? My thanks to him as my predecessor and for all the way he's chaired the board for the last 2 years while I've been a member. That many people spoke last night as well about his service very appreciatively. So I do have some recommendations to present from last night's ONS board regarding the Arts and Culture Funding report, which isn't on your agenda today. I also have some brief feedback on the MTFP update, which is item 6, and the new complaints policy, which is item 10, but no formal recommendations on either. So I just wanted to ask, would you like me to speak to those items now or when we get to them on the agenda?
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. We'll wait for those items which are on the agenda and I'll bring you in at that point. But please do tell us about your recommendation on the paper last night regarding the culture NPOs.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a paper brought to the board on arts and culture funding. This has been on the work plan of the ONS board for some time. It was a member request. There was enthusiastic discussion and a lot of strong support from board members for the way in which BCP Council currently funds and supports what are called national portfolio organisations within our local area. In particular, it was commented and noted about how by the council financially supporting those organisations, we leverage in funding from the Arts Council and elsewhere into the region, so that the importance of that support that we offer. The recommendations I think you should have as an agenda supplement. The recommendations that were agreed to Cabinet on this item were that the board recognises the value of the national portfolio organisations that are funded by BCP Council to health and wellbeing, youth and the local economy, and urges Cabinet to protect the funding that BCP currently provides. The board recommends that Cabinet endorse the work that's been done with schools by the NPOs and takes action to encourage all schools to take part. The ONS board recommends that Cabinet explore whether it would be of benefit for a councillor to be appointed as a member on the boards of any or all of the NPO organisations. And finally, that the board recommends Cabinet ensure that the Arts by the Sea Festival goes ahead next year. So those are the recommendations that were agreed last night. Now, I appreciate they were only developed last night, and therefore there's no expectation from me of comments or particularly a response at this point. But if I could ask Cabinet for a formal response to these recommendations within 2 months, back to the board in line with the Constitution.
Thank you very much, Councillor Salmon. I'm just going to hand over to Councillor Martin to give you a brief response now, and then we'll make sure that comes to you within two months.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you to Councillor Salmon for what was a really good discussion debate last night, about an hour and a quarter, I think it was. Explored some really important themes, and I was really grateful for that opportunity to talk about the NPOs and the cultural sector more generally. And of course the Arts Council as well, who are brilliant supporters of BCP. I don't think it'd be any great surprise to learn that, well, certainly out 3 of those 4 recommendations, obviously I would wholeheartedly endorse and thank the committee for those. The one that I have a bit of a problem with, and I think I'd raise it now just to put a marker down, and I did put a marker down last night about it, is number 3, about councillors being on the board of the NPOs, or any or all of them. I personally, I mean, it's, you know, I understand why it had been raised, but I personally don't think it would be helpful. I don't think it's appropriate for us to be on the board. I can't see what an individual councillor would bring to, you know, for example, the board of Pavilion Dance or the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra or Lighthouse. I don't think they would welcome that, although that I may be wrong. And I think the key point for me is we have a brilliant relationship with the NPOs, me personally as a portfolio holder, but also our officers as well. And I think we assure ourselves that the NPOs are delivering what we want them to deliver in terms of all the things that, you know, that Councillor Salmon has mentioned, health and wellbeing, economic development, destination, town centre revitalisation, education, all those things. I think we can assure ourselves that they are doing those things through the existing relationships, and I think that's the best way to do that, not necessarily to try and put a councillor on the board. That's just my personal view. Cabinet colleagues may take a different view on that, but I thought I would just say that because that's I wanted to put a marker down. But thank you again, Councillor Salmon, for last night. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, and thank you, Councillor Salmon. We'll bring you back in on the items that you discussed last night at scrutiny, Councillor Salmon.
Might I just,
yeah, go ahead.
apologies, Leader. Might I just, one further thing to mention from last night, which is it was just around a comment or a point that was raised around follow-up on recommendations that are made by the board to Cabinet, particularly ones which relate to Cabinet decisions. So I'd like to ask that Cabinet ensure that there is either a clear response to the board's recommendations given at the next Cabinet meeting, or that a formal response to any recommendations is given back to a future board. At the moment, it seems that this does happen sometimes, but not consistently. The request is in the interest of transparency and also of demonstrating the impact of scrutiny and of helping the ONS board to refine its recommendations in the future. So I hope that's okay to just comment on that now.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. And one way we could do that is if you wanted to invite portfolio holders back to give feedback on the whatever's been requested of Cabinet, that might give an opportunity then to have that proper follow-up, to have it as an item on a future overview and scrutiny board, and that way I think it would involve, you know, it would make it into a public occasion, so that there is that transparency that you're seeking.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you. Right, I'm just going to look around the room. I've had apologies from Councillor Carl Brown and Councillor Rigby, who are also chairs of overview and scrutiny committees, who can't be here today. I'm just going to look to Councillor Canavan to see if there are any recommendations, and there are none. So we'll move into the main part of the agenda, which the first one is agenda item 6, and that is the medium-term financial plan. Councillor Cox is going to be proposing this item. Can I see if there is a councillor to second?
Happy to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Over to you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. And doesn't seem 5 minutes since we were discussing the current year's budget, does it? And now we're already starting the process for the 26-27 budget process, and this paper is effectively the first stage in that process in order for us to set a legal and sustainable budget for 26-27. This paper has actually been brought forward. It's normally in about July of the year, and it's been brought forward to May, and that really is to enable the start of thinking about savings for the current year by directors and officers, and also, of course, to increase member participation in the process, which we've brought forward consistently. It also includes the local government funding reforms and the spring statement, plus details of the processes and the timelines in which we propose to take this budget process further. In addition, it also gives proposals for financial strategy in order to set a robust and a sustainable budget. Because as you can see from the paper, there are a number of challenges that we face in the current year which have emerged since we set our budget only a few months ago. I just want to remind Cabinet and anybody listening is that in the current year we set a council tax increase of 4.99%, and we also put forward £9.6 million of savings, which we did itemise and supported with plans in order to make sure that they do get delivered. In addition, I wanted to highlight the fact that of the 4.99% council tax increase, 60% of that council tax increase was absorbed by the increase in national insurance that the government brought in, which they did promise us that we would get refunded, but they didn't. And so that just shows you the sort of challenges that we face on all councils, not just this council, face on a day-to-day basis. The elephant in the room, as I keep calling it, is the DSG, the Dedicated Schools Grant deficit, which in the current year is moving from £108 million to a forecast of 165.5, completely and utterly unsustainable. But we are where we are, and that's the position we face. We did challenge the government during the last budget process to help us out. All they would let us do was to borrow more money. But having said that, the government have seemingly committed to actually resolving the issue. Now, how the hell they do that in such a short period of time, God only knows. But they did promise it, and that's one of the reasons we were able to set a legal budget for last year, or for the current year. Now, the funding reforms we've highlighted here, and one of the things that I want to highlight to Cabinet and to the rest of the public really is a quote which the Deputy Prime Minister gave, and I'm going to take the opportunity of reading it out because it is quite significant and quite brutal in what it says. And the Deputy Prime Minister, I think it was on the 28th of February 2025, so only early on this year, said, "This government is only giving the North what it's owed and what it deserves. For too long, our outdated system of council funding has been stacked against the North. The days of ministers expecting the North to go cap in hand ends now. And that's why Jim McMahon, our Minister for English Devolution and Local Government, we are making it simpler and clearer structures that will fix the foundations of local government. He is already beginning to replace the funding formula to give the North nearly £840 million more this year. That brings the North's total increase to just over 8%. The biggest increase of all regions in England by a good distance." Okay, and which did you hear? Well, you can all read it. So it's quite clear from the statement in which she set out is that the intention of the current government is to take funding away from the south. And I think we can all agree we are geographically in the south, up to the north, and so what's going to happen. What seems to be happening is that they will take funding away from us in down south to the north. Now, we don't actually get very much funding. We only get about £4 million, and according to some independent sources which we've gone to, they reckon that they've modelled that they think there's going to be a £7.4 million takeaway from us, BCP, to the north. Now that means effectively they're going to take away what they give us, the £4 million, and insist on us paying, i.e. BCP taxpayers paying to fund or subsidise the north, which is quite a change in circumstances, and something that we really do have to be prepared for. And this paper actually sets out the strategy to. Let's see, and you will see there that as well as that funding reform, we've also had a few revisions to the budget for which we set on a few months ago. Two main aspects of that is the increase in interest costs as a result of the activities going on across the pond, and also the fact that we will be looking for an increased payroll cost because of pay and reward and the latest negotiations that's going on with the unions in BCP. That will increase our base budget deficit to in the current year to 7.7 million unless we do something about it, and that's what we're trying to work on at the moment. So in terms of 26-27, we've put various scenarios in place as to what might happen, what might go well, what might not go so well. And as you can see, the base is 7.7 million. If everything goes well, then we might actually end up with an extra £8 million. If they don't go well, if they go worse, then it could be as much as £44 million we could be in deficit by, which is quite staggering given the cuts that we've already had to make. So what we are trying to do is to prepare for a middle course, which is still £19 million. And that's what we've asked officers to go away and think about as to what might have to happen in these circumstances. What can they come up with that we could enact in order to create a balanced budget? So that's the medium-term financial plan and the for this report, and I'd welcome any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I'm just going to invite Councillor Kate Salmon back as Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Board to give us some thoughts from last night's meeting, although I understand there are no recommendations. So, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Leader. So yes, this report sparked a wide-ranging debate on various aspects of the council's finances. In particular, members expressed, as Councillor Cox has already referred to, expressed their very strong feelings as to the seriousness of the situation in relation to the DSG deficit, and their consternation, which I know is shared by us all, that the year is wearing on and there's still no concrete plan from the government. The board doesn't offer any recommendations on this report. However, we did note that discussions are ongoing between the scrutiny chairs and vice chairs regarding how we would like to engage with the budget setting process this year, and I certainly hope to have a consensus on this to share with you as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Right, I'm going to open this up to any other councillors who are not on Cabinet. So, Councillor Canavan, please do come on up.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to elaborate on what Kate has just said about the work of scrutiny in relation to the budget. So a few days ago, we had a meeting of chairs and vice chairs of all the overview and scrutiny committees. So the discussion really was in the context of the pressure that democratic services are currently facing in terms of the workload. And we were trying to think about doing budget scrutiny in a slightly different way. It wasn't felt that the work that we did last year on the working groups could be repeated. I mean, it was very valuable work. It was very interesting work. And we all learned a great deal, but I don't think, well, I certainly didn't think, and I don't think other chairs felt that it fundamentally altered the shape of the budget. So we wanted to try and think about ways in which we could do budget scrutiny differently, and that's what we're currently working on. So we are working that up as a way of looking at options and choices and the way in which the authority wants to prioritise the work it does in the future. So that's just to let you know that that bit of work is forthcoming, and I'm sure through Councillor Salmon, we'll be able to feed that back quite soon. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Right, I'm not seeing any others indicate, so we'll go to Cabinet now for debate or discussion. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to comment when I read through this report. Councillor Cox has picked up a lot of it on the section about the local government reforms and the consultation on that and our response, which is detailed in Appendix A. And while there's things personally I think to be welcomed, that the new Labour government have said they're going to bring about a multi-year settlement from 2026-27, which I think local authorities have waited many, many years to have, because we've been struggling with one-year settlements and never been able to properly plan long-term, knowing what our sort of what government will be giving us in the long term. So a multi-year settlement is to be welcomed, but I know from the comments in Appendix A the difficulties, and I think it says in there that BCP could be disadvantaged by these changes, and Councillor Cox has sort of detailed that, and I think I'd probably say rather than BCP could be disadvantaged, I'd say BCP will be disadvantaged. I think it's really looking likely that the funding settlements we get won't be what we've been used to. So I really think that's sort of important for people to note. And I think, particularly for me, I think it's important for our local MPs to note as well that we're often being asked by our local MPs to do more, whether that be around play facilities, potholes, events, those sorts of things, and we're regularly hearing them asking us to do more. But it seems that with this, the fear is that they'll be asking us to do it with one hand tied behind our back, while taking money away from us and reducing our ability to actually do the things that they're wanting us to do. So I'd hope that all of our local MPs across the whole conurbation listening to that, and will be inputting to the sort of government consultations and government discussions about local government funding settlements, because it's critical for, if they do actually want us to deliver the things that they're asking us to do, it's critical they get involved in that and make sure that we aren't disadvantaged by the outcome of the government consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I do feel I do need to say something about the dedicated school grant and the Hindhead block deficit, because Councillor Cox very eloquently explained the situation again. I always feel the need to apologise at this point, but I always say I'm not going to. Basically, because I do know so many parents and carers spend a lot of time fighting to ensure that their children get the education that they deserve. The government have promised us that this will be sorted out, and I know the same promise is been made to other people in the southwest, because I can only speak for the southwest really, because that's where my contacts are. So I am looking forward to it and hoping that in the next year or the year after we won't be having the same conversation again. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Can I see if any other cabinet members? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think it's pretty grim, and we've spent most of this administration's time struggling with very significant challenges to our finance. And one of the elements that we have tried to look at is community governance review and the opportunity for town councils in Bournemouth and Poole to keep going some of the things that people love that we cannot afford to fund. And I think we do need to make it clear that if people want some of those things, then a town council is probably the way to achieve that. Not least given the pressures that Councillor Cox has highlighted in his report. And I think the other thing that we are trying to apply pressure is not just on savings, perpetual savings, is about the sensible means of raising income and using our resources wisely. And that's certainly something that I think individually and collectively we do challenge on, and I think the public needs to know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. Very grateful to Councillor Cox for his introductory comments, and I think he set out the situation extremely clearly, also extremely gently and calmly, which is perhaps his personality. But I'm not sure that it's the appropriate tone, and I must admit, even Councillor Hadley's description of the situation as pretty grim, I think is understatement. I think the situation is pretty horrendous. And Councillor Hadley refers to the possibility that town councils might be able to provide some of the services that BCP will not be able to provide. I'm interested in the comments that are appearing all over the place on social media, where residents are expressing the view that we pay more than enough in council tax already, we don't want to pay any more. And I don't think residents fully appreciate the damage that has been done to local government, not just BCP, but right across the country, by repeated cuts in government grant. And the refusal of government to allow council tax to be increased by more than the 5%. That figure of national insurance alone costing us 60% of the increase in council tax is one that I'm not sure residents realise. They work in the assumption that 5%, 4.99 is more than enough, and should cover inflation and should cover anything and everything, and we should be delivering all of the services that they want. And I think we need to say loud and clear, we can't do it unless we get the right support from national government. And I have to admit that a year ago, I was marginally optimistic. I must admit, when it came to the general election, my first preference would have been a Liberal Democrat government. That wasn't the case, but my second preference did emerge because of the other possibilities. A Labour government was my second preference. And I thought from all that I've known of the Labour Party and their policies in the past, that they would be more understanding of the situation that local government is in than they have proven to be over the past year. I'm utterly disappointed with the fact that not simply the national insurance issue was not dealt with as it should have been, but that the whole of the challenge, as Councillor Cox calls it, to local government has not been understood, and there is a total failure to address that. The residents of BCP are going to suffer because of that. The residents right across the country are going to suffer because local government will be doing less than it ought to do. I'm not sure just how far those in the north of England will benefit, but the solution is not about redistributing funds nationally. It is about somehow providing more funding for local government, and it is government's job to sort that out. I know, Leader, that you meet from time to time with members of Parliament, and it has already been mentioned that we need that message to be loud and clear to our members of Parliament. I'm not sure from anything they have said in public that they fully understand the situation, but can I hope that it will continue to be spelled out to them and that we rely on them and on government as a whole to address this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hannah. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? Oh, Councillor Martin. Yes, please.
Yeah, just very briefly, when we set out on the community governance path, what, a year or so ago, I think there were a few of us who said this is going to be a really difficult sell because, you know, the bottom line will be people don't want to see more councillors. They're sick of most of us anyway. They don't think we need more councils, and they don't want to pay anything more in council tax, or in this case, precepts. And it's always difficult to know how much social media is the real world, but you know, there's, as Councillor Hannah's just said, there's a lot of negativity on social media about this whole thing. So whether we haven't collectively done a good enough job in selling the idea, or at least putting forward the benefits, I don't know. I've got three events coming up in the next 3 weeks where I'm going to talk about the benefits of parish and town councils in terms of how they can invest in their communities, and obviously without using the H word, because I'm going to try not use the H word today. You know, I have first-hand knowledge of how parish and town councils can and do invest in their communities. This is the sort of investment, and Councillor Hadley mentioned investment earlier on. That investment is going on in the limited number of parish and town councils that we've got at the minute. So I think we should just reflect, well, take the opportunity in the next month or so. I can't remember when the consultation on this ends, but double down on our efforts to try and explain to people that parish and town councils are part of the answer. They're not the answer, they're part of the answer in localised communities in terms of the difficult, grim times that are ahead, and there are ways of investing, and that's one of them. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Cox, would you like to sum up?
I would, thank you, Leader, and I welcome all the comments that have been given, and I'll certainly try and be a bit harsher rather than too kindly. I think I do want to say that we do welcome scrutiny of the budget as much as can be done, and actually I thought last year's scrutiny was some of the best scrutiny of the budget process that's happened in BCP so far. So I wouldn't want you to throw the bathwater out with the baby. Or bathe the baby out with the bathwater. That's an expression. So I think there was some good stuff done, and you know, I wouldn't want to alter it just because there wasn't seen to be any changes to the budget. I wouldn't want to change it just for that purpose, because as I said last night, actually there is very little sometimes that you can change with the budget. You know, we're all got our hands tied behind our back when we're setting these things. None of us want to do the difficult stuff. As it was last year, the actual cuts as such. The real cuts were very, very small. Most of the changes to the budget, the savings to the budget, were actually increases in income and efficiency savings, which we'd all welcome. So I would caution on that one, but I would still, welcome any input that you can make. I would also just say that it's very easy to recommend that we don't cut this or we don't cut that. That's an easy way out. It's the harder job is to propose savings which might hurt people, might disadvantage people. What we try and do, certainly as a cabinet, is to make sure that any savings that do come forward are based on real efficiency savings, preferably, and also increases in income where we can manage it. So yeah, I would welcome scrutiny, particularly the comments from Councillor Canavan, I look forward to the next year where we can set a legally and sustainably balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. So can I take a vote on accepting the recommendations set out in the paper? All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, so we're going to move on to agenda item 7, which is the BCP local plan next steps, the updated development scheme and statement of community involvement. I'm going to be proposing and presenting this item. Is there a cabinet member to second this one, please?
I'd like to second. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. So to introduce this paper, I'd like to briefly talk about how we got here. We submitted a draft local plan last summer. It went to examination in January and the inspectors rejected it. We are now in a very difficult position as a council because despite the immense work that went into the draft local plan and my belief that it was and is sound, the inspectors have left us little choice when it comes to our next steps. The inspectors concluded that the council failed to adequately discharge the duty to cooperate, particularly in relation to housing needs. The government's standard method for calculating housing needs uses the 2014 based household projections. However, these projections are inaccurate for our area due to the overestimation of student immigration figures. The previous national planning policy framework allowed us to use an alternative method which was more appropriate to the needs of our area, and that would have meant we needed to deliver 1,600 homes a year, which we could do, and we could do without actually working with our neighbouring authorities to accommodate any shortfall. This was particularly important to us because under the new framework, we will need to deliver 3,000 homes a year when the most we have been able to deliver at our best is just 1/3 of that in 1 year. The inspectors weren't persuaded by our exceptional circumstances that justified the alternative and therefore required us to work with our neighbours to address the shortfall on housing numbers rather than on issues we work together with them normally on, such as nutrient neutrality, strategic transport and employment needs. The inspector's post-hearing letter from March 2025 indicated that the council did not engage constructively, actively and on an ongoing basis during the preparation of the plan on strategic housing. Paragraph 37 of the inspector's letter states, there are 2 options open to the council, either to withdraw the plan from examination or to ask that we write a report setting out our conclusions. The latter option would incur further expense and the contents of our report would likely be very similar to this letter. My recommendation to Cabinet is that we take on board the words of the inspector and we move forward pragmatically, not only because of the additional cost indicated, but because there is a statutory requirement for local authorities to have an up-to-date local plan and to review their plans every 5 years. And our current local plans from 2012, 2014 and 2018 are all older than 5 years. There's lots of really good work in the draft local plan. and we can bring that forward into the new draft. But by addressing the issues the inspector raised and constructively engaging with neighbouring authorities and with our own communities, the council can ensure that the new local plan meets the duty to cooperate requirement and is sound at examination. I want to also mention in this paper the draft local development statement, which is in the appendices. This was considered by Cabinet on the 5th of March and submitted to Government on the 6th of March. The updated local development scheme reflects the needs for our new local plan rather than a partial review. So it will be accepted as long as we accept the prior recommendation. The Statement of Community Involvement was also adopted in September 2020 and is due for a review and update. The updated one includes factual updates, such as things like removing COVID and the LEP, and some of those outdated references that no longer apply, and also the inclusion of the new engagement principles and government planning reforms. So I just want to talk briefly about my concerns here and why this decision is actually going to be a very difficult one for the council. For me, delivering 3,000 homes a year, which is what the mandatory housing standard calculation means that we would have to deliver, is not just going to be difficult, but it's going to be very nearly impossible. And I think it's really important that we as Cabinet, that council, and that our communities understand what we will be asking of them. The standard method doesn't actually include our constraints as a local area. We have sea on one side, we have harbours on the other side, we have a lot of protected heathland, and we have floodplains across the conurbation. Without actually taking into consideration where this housing would go, we are going to have to consider how we can meet this need in the most creative ways possible, whether that means building up a lot higher, whether that means sacrificing grey and green belts. But I just want to say why that is really important. And it's because if we can't demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, then we risk actually losing control of planning altogether. And this has happened in other local authorities where they haven't been able to demonstrate that supply. And in fact, we're already in a tilted balance as a local authority. And what that means is that we could get into a situation where we are no longer making decisions against our own development plans, that we are instead relying on appeals from the Secretary of State, and that we will pretty much have an inability to defend our position because we won't be able to have that supply in writing in our local developments, in our development plans. My biggest concern here is that the result of delivery of housing by this way, by introducing the mandatory housing numbers, is that it won't actually help deliver the housing that we need for our communities. What we will end up doing if we're in that situation where we lose control is we'll see a massive influx of things like luxury flats. We may actually even be targeted by developers as somewhere where people can build whatever they want to, because we don't have the ability to say no because we can't demonstrate that housing supply. And for me, that actually doesn't meet the aims of the Labour government, and it doesn't meet the aims of this cabinet, and it doesn't meet the aims of this council. And in particular, our communities will suffer as a result of that. The approach puts quantity over quality, and it does little to provide the safe, affordable and accessible accommodation for local people. And that is a very real risk because it's happening elsewhere. I've urged the MPs to consider this in their representations at a national level, and I've also been vocal on this in our local government networks. But this recommendation is to council, and we'll be discussing it at our next council meeting. But I think it's really important that we realise that going from 1,600 homes a year to 3,000 homes a year is a huge jump for this local authority, and it will be a huge shock to our communities about how we try and make that happen, and it may not even result in housing that actually addresses our local needs. So this item hasn't yet been considered by Overview and Scrutiny, but it will be going to Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee tomorrow evening. Can I please ask if there are councillors who are not on Cabinet who wish to speak on this paper? Councillor Canavan.
Chair, I'd deal with the last issue first. So it was raised at Overview and Scrutiny Board last night, even though it wasn't on the agenda. And it was mentioned that it's going to Environment Place tomorrow. So the issue for me is a question I pose: is Environment Place the right place for to discuss this plan? And I think certainly one of the councillors last night said that he didn't think it was. I don't think it is either. I think it's fair for Environment and Place to think about what might the nature of scrutiny look like. I think that's a fair. In terms of scrutiny of what the new emerging local plan might look like, I don't believe that is an issue for Environment Place. I think we have to find a different way of dealing with that. I'll mention that to Environment Place tomorrow, and I'll certainly mention it when it gets to Cabinet. I don't think you've got any alternative but to accept the recommendations that are before you. But, you know, I've told you this before, that the local plan was a waste of space and that you were going to be faced with having to rewrite it. And although certain colleagues indicated that they thought I might get away with a partial review, you're not going to be able to do that. You're going to have to start from scratch. That's not to say you can't use the information or the data that you've already collected in a different way. But in terms of what the local plan the shape of the local plan is going to look like, you are starting again from scratch in the way that I've indicated before that I felt you were going to have to. So having heard the party political broadcast from Councillor Hand on behalf of the Liberal Democrats, I'm not going to repeat one on behalf of the Labour Party in relation to housing targets. You've got them. You have to deal with it. Whether you like 3,000, the target 3,000 or not, that's what you'd be expected to deliver. Not only are you going to be faced with mandatory housing targets, and I've told you this before, not only are you going to be faced with that, you're going to be faced with a fundamentally different planning approach to planning. That is clearly something which is coming in your direction, whether you like it or not. In terms of the paper and the LDS, doesn't build a single house, doesn't fill any empty shops. It's great words on a paper, but you're going to have to find a way of delivering that housing. And that's what I think the challenge before you is. So the timetable in this plan is just, well, it's fine, but it's cloud cuckoo land. You're going to have to build 2,000 houses in the next year, or you will lose control of your ability to be able to shape what this planning system looks like in this authority. So the other thing I think I just wanted to say, Chair, I think I may have misread it, or I may be misquoting you, but I think you were quoted in the paper recently as saying that Bournemouth has yet to find its future. I think that's accurate, but it's our job to decide what that future is. It's our job collectively to decide what the future of Bournemouth is going to look like. And we have to do it now, we have to do it quickly, because the local plan is an essential ingredient into ensuring that, that we shape Bournemouth as a place. At the moment, I think we're drifting. We don't have that. We don't know what it is. We don't even know what we want it to be. And that is a decision that I think you have to take within this context, and you have to do it quickly, in my view. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Canavan. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Councillor Canavan's first comments there, as he mentioned, this did come up towards the end of the board meeting last night, although it wasn't on the agenda. And just to add that I have since then spoken to the Chair of Environment and Place just briefly. Obviously picked up this being chair yesterday, so I haven't had a lot of time to think about this, but I think there's consensus from what I can see, from what I can understand amongst those chairs that I've spoken to, that this issue needs to be um, that all of scrutiny needs to have a role here, not just environment and place. And I don't think there's any dissension from that I'm aware of. So hopefully the scrutiny chairs and vice chairs can get together and talk about how best to scrutinise the local plan going forward. So I hope that helps. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. One suggestion I might make, obviously in the Constitution, the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee is responsible for scrutinising the local plan, but that is not to say that our scrutiny chairs can't work together and actually think about how we could look at this either across Environment and Place or across Overview and Scrutiny Board, or potentially even bringing in the others to consider it from their perspectives as well. So I'd really encourage you to think about how best you would like to scrutinise the local plan, and I'd really welcome that. I think Councillor Canavan said you a lot, but I see this as something that is every councillor's responsibility. The local plan is going to take us all working within our communities, working across our conurbation, thinking strategically about what and where we can deliver. So I'd really like for us all to take ownership of this. And of course, scrutiny is going to be a really important function in providing those checks and balances. And I would also just say that there is wider engagement. So obviously creating a local plan is a huge process. It's not something that we're going to be doing in the next couple of months. It's going to take years. And that is because it does take that huge amount of engagement. So when it comes to our roles as councillors in our communities, we need to be very clear on what we're asking our communities and really take ownership of this local plan together. Okay, so I'm going to see if there are any Cabinet members who wish to speak on this item. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, I was a member of the working party for the previous BCP local plan, and this was BCP's first local plan. And I think we were then working to a different set of criteria from a different government. Now we have a new government. We have, again, different criteria and a new national planning policy, which sets out housing figures that are mandatory, together with the need to deliver affordable housing. And as we've heard, we are being tasked by government to build 3,000 homes a year. That's 45,000 over 15 years. And out of these, we must build 1,500 affordable homes every year, which is 22,000 over 15 years. And I repeat, these figures are mandatory. And I do appreciate there is a growing need to build homes for local people. But we make no mistake about it, these housing targets will be very challenging for this area, as we are, of course, limited in terms of available space to build any new homes, because amongst other constraints, we do have a rather stunning coastline, which doesn't appear to have been considered. I also understand we have in BCP granted planning permission for 8,000 homes which have not been built. Perhaps the government should be looking into the reasons behind this situation with a view to seeing what they can do to solve or improve this situation. Developers have clearly got their own agenda here. I would also add there are some wards, like mine, which are already fully developed and are only able to deliver infill homes. And in these cases, I think it's very important to properly consider the quality of these homes and not just tick the numbers box. In addition, there is also the effect Airbnbs can have on the housing market, as they can raise the cost of living for local renters while primarily benefiting local landlords and non-resident tourists. So having outlined some of these problems that we're going to face, I will support the recommendations, because clearly we do need a new local plan. And the government is making it quite clear That's what they want us to do, and actually not giving us much of a choice, if any choice. So we need to get on with it, and we need to make every effort to work constructively. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, just a couple of points on the environmental theme, really. Again, probably not a surprise that I'm mentioning that, and I have said this before, probably in full council, but this council does have a really good track record on the environment, and not surprisingly, given the incredible place that we live in, the coastline. I mean, Leader, you've already mentioned the two harbours, the coastline, the heathland, the incredible woodland we've got. We live in an amazing area, and clearly that is going to be under threat from this sledgehammer, blunt approach from the Labour government. We've got this council has come forward with things like the nature recovery strategy, the urban forest strategy, the financing nature strategy, biodiversity net gain, and a local plan that was incredibly protective of our natural environment. And I think it's worth reminding ourselves. It's often been said, but always bears repeating, that this country is one of the most nature depleted in the world. And clearly, if the Labour government has its way, it's going to become even more nature depleted. So I would just make a plea, really, that, you know, this, I mean, Councillor Hadley mentioned the financial situation of the council is grim. I would say the planning, the prospects of planning, the effects of the Labour government's targets is going to be really, really grim as well. I would just make a plea that when we go through this process of reviewing the local plan and redrafting it, that we lift and shift the really powerful environmental policies, protection policies that we've got in the local plan into the new version of it. Leader, as you said earlier on, there's some really great work gone into the local plan. Let's save as much of it as we can. I think it's really instructive when we look at the Labour government's its public utterances about planning and about housing targets. They never talk about the environment. I mean, it's like the environment doesn't really matter, and that's obviously hugely worrying. Just a quick point about the idea that this is quantity over quality, and actually this is a strategy that won't bring forward what the government actually wants. So there's a current planning application in my ward for, I think it's 23 luxury flats on the site of 2 homes on the clifftop, which I've personally opposed in terms of its scale and size. These are all going to end up as basically as second homes. That doesn't solve the problem, and we've already got dozens and dozens of second homes in Highcliffe. Oh, I mentioned the H word. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And that's, you know, again, that's a symptom of a planning system that's completely wrong, and this isn't going to do anything to the Labour government's policies are going to do nothing to solve that. And just a final point on something that Patrick mentioned earlier on about, and I may have misunderstood him, but talking about Bournemouth Town Centre, it's up to us to sort it out, it's up to us to shape it. Well, whatever happened to partnership working? There are lots of groups and organisations and companies who are doing great things in Bournemouth already. Okay, so we've still got a long way to go, but I've mentioned it before, there's lots of investment going into Bournemouth. So it isn't just up to us, and it isn't just our job to do that, and it's about a lot of other people working with us and working together and collaborating. So apologies if I misunderstood what you said, Patrick, but I think you've gotten that completely wrong. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm going to sort of revert to my ward councillor role really here, because you know, to speak for the community that I represent, my community actually took part a huge amount in the local plan. In fact, I think there was one document that said we were overrepresented. Because of the amount of comments that Bearwood and Merley actually put into it. I think it was a really good process, and it demonstrates the amount of input that we had. Most people know Bearwood and Merley. we've got housing, we've got quite a lot of remaining greenbelt. We have a large triple SI, which is internationally important. All these areas have got pressures. My community understands the idea that we need housing for local people because I talk to young people who say, look, I'd like to live in Bearwood and Merley, but I can't afford it. There's not houses available. I would like something that I can move to. And a lot of people do move back to the area. However, there's a lot of worry and a lot of concern because the triple SI now is getting a huge amount of pressure because of the amount of population that's around it. You've all heard about the fires, the amount of footfall on the heath, which is degrading it. We have Greenbelt, which is now under pressure. I don't still understand, I'm afraid, the idea of grey belt. I haven't quite got my head around what that means. I think I might have a little area in the ward, but I'm not sure. My residents are actually quite scared to what might happen. In fact, they're feeling bullied, to be honest. They're feeling that they were part of a decision which is now being ignored and being bullied to accept things that they don't want to accept. They see a lot of time stuck in traffic because, of course, when you just build houses with nothing to go with it, everybody has to travel. I will totally accept the recommendation of this because we do need somehow to get some control back and do what we can. But I would just like to share the concerns of my community. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it takes two to tango, and it seems slightly ironic that the failure to adequately discharge our duty to cooperate, because I thought we had talked actively with Dorset Council, and clearly they've got their own targets and priorities, and they also are going to have to find an awful lot more homes in their beautiful countryside. And clearly we're going to have to follow the recommendation because it seems to be all other places lead to us to a much worse position. I think Councillor Martin actually stole my thunder in terms of the environment and some of the issues that we have to worry about in terms of our constrained area and protecting what we have from an environment and climate perspective. But there's also perhaps opportunities in revisiting the plan because we will have to look very hard at our infrastructure requirements, things like utilities. We are constrained on electricity supply, on sewerage, on all those sorts of things, on transport. We are one of the most congested areas of the country, and on community facilities as we intensify. And again, I would come back to what Councillor Canavan said, because we need some collaboration support from government for these things. Some of the strategic transport infrastructure we've just never had because we haven't been considered as the very significant sized conurbation that we are, and not least the current the recent M4 to South Coast South Dorset study didn't really look after the needs of our urban area at all. So I think there's a real challenge for us there, and part of the collaboration piece does have to be, will it take a new town in this area to meet our needs and Dorset's needs, and something that we can collaborate with Dorset on, and would they be up for that and serious about that? Because it's one thing for us to be told we haven't collaborated, but we do need to work with others. We're also constrained with Hampshire because we've got the New Forest, and actually very little this side of the New Forest to be able to do anything across the border with Hampshire, but it's something we always have to consider. So I will be obviously following the recommendation, voting that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be supporting the recommendations, but it's really disappointing sort of where we've got to with the local plan. And a few things have been mentioned about sort of government policy, etc. But I don't disagree with the national government's policy about the intention to build a lot more homes, and particularly a lot more social rental homes. And actually, if you look at our Liberal Democrat housing policy, it's quite similar, that we want to build a lot more houses. We want to build 150,000 new social homes per year. And I think a lot of other policies have those, a lot of other political parties have those policies to build a lot more housing to deal with the housing crisis that we have right across the country. So I don't think it's an issue with what we want to do nationally in terms of delivering housing, delivering affordable housing. It's all a question of how we go about doing it. And certainly my party's policy is primarily you build 10 new garden cities across the UK to deal with a massive chunk of that demand. And that way you can build all the infrastructure and all the facilities you need and do it properly. And that takes the pressure off of existing developed areas like Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, who will continue to deliver more housing, but aren't expected to deliver more than, to be honest, I think physically possible. You know, we've got so much floodplain, so much protected heathland, and we've got a sea, so we can't build to the south of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole because it's a bit wet there. So I think it's not a question of what we nationally want to do, it's a question of how you go about doing it. And that is my criticism of the government's policy. They basically said, this is the number we need, so you've got to do that many in your area. And that is just not going to work in this area. Basically, national government are saying to BCP, so you're going to have to build all these 45,000 houses in the next 15 years. The only way I can see of doing that is we're going to have 20 to 30 story blocks. So we're going to end up like parts of Hong Kong. Or we're going to lose our entire green belt. You know, we just forget about having a green belt and just build everything between here and Wimborne and Corfmullen and take it all out. That's what they're saying. And for me, that is not how we go about solving the housing crisis. We go about solving the housing crisis by identifying areas across the country to build new garden cities. So that's my criticism of the national policy that is leading us to this solution. And I will take issue with Councillor Canavan said you're going to have to build 2,000 houses in the next year. Well, we can't do that as a council. We have a few bits of land. We do a small amount of house building. We can give planning permission for 2,000 houses in the next year. It's not going to make a jot of difference because we've already given permission for 8,000. So to say you're going to have to build 2,000 houses in the next year completely is a misunderstanding of how house building works. It's down to major house builders and landowners to come forward with appropriate plans to be able to build those, and then they've got to find the skilled workforce to actually build those. And that's my other criticism. I just physically don't think in this country we have got the workforce to actually build that level of housing. So we need a massive investment in skills and training to be able to do that. We're not going to be able to bring people in from Europe or around the world to do it for us because national government are going to want to cut immigration. So we're going to have to train our own workforce to deliver this. So I'm going to support the recommendations, but I just wanted to sort of put it out there that I totally disagree with how the government are going about delivering these numbers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I've listened intently to the debate that has been had around the Cabinet table today, and it's been really, really interesting. I mean, I actually am fully supportive of the Labour government's ambition to build more homes. However, as has been raised by Councillor Brown, Councillor Hadley, most of my peers today, it's really how you go about it, and it's so difficult to see us building 3,000 homes a year for the next 15 years. Over the last 5 years, we've built 4,400 more or less, so that equates to 900 a year. So you're looking at over three times the amount. The leader said in the opening of her speech that we'd be able to manage 1,600 a year. Well, we're not reaching that at the minute. You know, it is really a step up, and I think you can put a figure on it, and you can have the aspiration and the ambition, which is good from Labour. But if you don't support that with investment, you know, they want 1,500 affordable homes. Well, they need to be subsidised then. The Homes England, the national government, they need to put real money and real investment into those. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And then you've got all the other things like Councillor Brown mentioned around the construction market. You know, we have 20% less workers in the construction market since 2008. That's in real terms, that's 250,000 less skilled workers than we had in 2008. You know, there isn't the labour market. You look at the infrastructure, you know, around transport, around health, around all the different services that you need for that level of housing. Where is that coming from? You know, that's my big concern. So I completely appreciate the Labour government's ambition in doing that, but the way they're going about it, they need more. So yeah, I'm fully supportive of the recommendations set out because we're not left with many options. There's no point in us spending more money to go back to an inspector who's already made it clear that they're not going to pass the local plan. So we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. But with that said, we really need to keep in mind local residents' views. You know, this is a local plan, and we need to consider what's best for our area, for protecting the most important part of our area, which is our environment. You know, we have a spectacular place to live, and that needs protecting. But also, we do need homes, and that's essential as well. So I think it's about getting that balance. I think 1,600 homes a year did that. It stepped up our ambition considerably. 3,000 just seems unmanageable and unrealistic, unfortunately. But yeah, happy to agree with the recommendations that set out.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson, and thank you to Cabinet, because I was writing notes as we were going through, and then the points I was writing were raised as we went, and I feel that we are all very much on the same page on this issue. For me, I agree with Councillor Wilson's last comments there around the fact that we do have a housing crisis. I don't think anyone in Cabinet or anyone beyond that is going to deny that we as councillors on a regular basis get casework from residents unable to access affordable, safe, and secure housing within our communities, and people are priced out. We don't have the homes for our young people. We don't have homes that people can live on when they're getting paid in an average wage role here in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And that is an issue of market failure. This is not an issue of the planning system. We already have 8,000 homes with approval, but they're not counted as part of this. It is not an issue of even with our developers or anyone else. It purely sits with the fact that the market is not responding to the needs of our communities, and instead this policy from the Labour government puts profit and the profit into the pockets of developers above the needs of our communities. I think it's going to be really, really difficult as we take this through to the next stage. And as much as the ambition is there from government, as much as as this council, this cabinet will agree with meeting the needs of our communities, unfortunately, this is not the way to do it, and it's going to cause a lot of pain in our area, in our towns, and across our communities as we try to find places where this housing will go. And of course, if we don't do that, then we're in a situation where actually the developers can do whatever they want to do because we don't have that control. Okay, so I'm going to ask Cabinet if we can take a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the paper? Thank you, that is unanimous. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is Our Place and Environment, the Consolidated Active Travel Fund 25-26. Councillor Hadley will be proposing and presenting this report. Can I ask a Cabinet member to second?
Yeah, happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hadley, over to you.
Thank you, Leah. Yes, so some good news after all that difficult stuff. We have been awarded by government £1.459 million for Consolidated Active Travel Fund for the forthcoming year, and it's partly because we've demonstrated delivery of a number of schemes, despite some people thinking they're problematic, and I'm seeing increasingly people making use of them, which is really good. So there's two parts to this. One is 331,000 revenue, and the other is 1.128 million pounds in capital. The revenue allows us to continue with the work that we're doing particularly with schools and Sustrans, the Bike It Plus officers and school streets, and we have got an increasing number of places around school premises where we are creating a safer location for the kids to arrive at school and leave school, and encouraging those who do come in by sustainable means not to get mown down by those that don't. So that's a significant part of that. Then two other elements. One is around designing the active travel schemes, so effectively designing the capital schemes, and the third is around minor measures linked to the Barrack Road Bike Bus, which is a voluntary led accompanied bike link in the Christchurch area that has been running for 3 years and was actually the first in the country and has been really really celebrated in a number of ways, partly by Active Travel England, but also by On the One Show and various other national and being copied by other places. So that's really worthwhile. But having cycled it with them, and there was one location in particular where pedestrians were really struggling to cross a side road because of the way in which the traffic was using it as a slingshot roundabout. The second element is capital, and there are 3 schemes under that. One is Recreation Road to Coy Pond. This extends the link from Bournemouth Town Centre up through the gardens to link up with Upper Parkstone and creates a safer route there. It's actually a route that I personally use quite, I don't know if that's a declaring interest, I use a piece of infrastructure, but it's a route that will open up that very residential area to a safe route into this centre of Bournemouth. The second is on Highcliffe Road between Somerford Roundabout and Holborn Roundabout, a toucan crossing, and it's the highest priority within the local transport plan for crossings of all of them. Effectively, when people ask for crossings, they all get scored by the road safety team, and this one's the top of that list and needs to be done. And the third is on Parkstone Road in Poole, a toucan crossing at the bottom of Birds Hill Road, which has been the area of a couple of quite serious crashes. And particularly, there's a lot of elderly people who live on Parkstone Road being able to access the park and get across that road. So that's the priorities. There was I did get correspondence, particularly from Friarscliffe Residents Association, concerned about why pedestrians couldn't just walk either to the Somerford roundabout or to the Holborn roundabout and go around the long way. Having observed that site myself, there are a lot of people who chance it crossing the dual carriageway. The traffic is not, although it's marked up as a 40-mile-an-hour road. Very often the traffic isn't going that fast. It's just there's a lot of it, and it's very hazardous. There's a lot of kids going to particularly Highcliffe School are using that route. So I think it's a very valuable scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. I just want to see if there are any councillors outside of Cabinet wishing to speak on this. Not seeing any indication. Okay, over to Cabinet. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think as I'm seconding this, I should speak on it. I welcome the additional funding. It's a sort of reasonably modest amount, but particularly on the schemes that are proposed, I support all of them for different reasons, really. Councillor Headley, just talking about the pedestrian cycle route improvements between Recreation Road and Coy Pond. Councillor Headley mentioned that he uses that. I have used that. Members will know I don't actually own a bike, but I use barrel bikes and barrel scooters quite regularly, most days. And I've done that route, and it does need improving. I'll probably be doing it this afternoon as well, actually, because we've got a meeting in Poole later this evening. So I do know that route, and I do understand the sort of need to make improvements there. So I'd certainly support that one. The Parkstone Road toucan crossing next to Poole Park and Birds Hill Road, I've had resident contacting me about that, saying how much it's needed. So absolutely support that one. And although I don't know the Highcliffe Road toucan crossing, it sounds very similar to one we've just had put in on Ringwood Road, where there are other crossings towards the end by the Mountbatten Arms roundabout and the Clock Garage roundabout, but council are currently putting in a new crossing in the middle. And I've had people contact me saying, well, why can't people walk to the other ones? It's usually about a 3/4 kilometre diversion if you want to walk all the way along to one and then back along the other side. And people take a chance to get across the dual carriageway, and we've had 3 fatalities there in recent years. So I'm really pleased that we're proposing to do this before we've got the issue with fatalities on the road. So we're actually not trying to shut the gate after the horse has bolted. We're actually looking at that, saying actually people are risking it crossing the dual carriageway. We need to do something preemptively about that and put it in. And I'm fairly confident that that investment will help us to save people's lives and actually stop people risking running across a dual carriageway. So I think that's a really valuable investment in terms of road safety for that one. So overall, yeah, totally in support of all the schemes proposed, and not just maybe criticised that well, this is just more investment for cyclists and pedestrians. What about motorists? To be frank, this is really important for motorists. I've cycled along Yarmouth Road and those roads there, and actually, if we improve the cycle infrastructure to get through there, it will take cyclists and pedestrians away from those roads, and it will help the motorists. It will give people more options for travelling between Bournemouth and Poole, and hopefully encourage people to leave their cars at home and reduce the amount of congestion along some of those roads. So it's all to help motorists and to help everybody travelling across our conurbation, whether that be by car, whether it be by lorry, whether it be by bus, or whether it be cycling or walking. All of these schemes help all road users and all people that travel in our conurbation, not just one particular group. So I support all of them on that basis.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? Councillor Hadley, anything to add?
Yes, if I may, actually, Councillor Brown referred to no fatalities at that junction on that section of road. There have actually been two quite recent serious injuries to children. So I think that's why it's the top of the list, because there have been injuries. Fortunately, they're not fatalities, because that still can be. I don't know the detail, but it can be life changing for families, and particularly when it's a young life. That's why it's the top of that list. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I take a vote on recommending to council the recommendations as set out in the paper? All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, agenda item 9 is the Russell Coates Art Gallery Museum Arts Council England Museum Estate and Development grant. It's quite a mouthful. Councillor Martin, you're going to be proposing this report. Can I see who will be seconding this one, please? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Over to you, Councillor
Thank
Wilson.
you. If I can just, this should be fairly straightforward. If I can just rewind about 18 months, your colleagues will remember that we had an item at full council to agree some funding to the Russell Coates Museum. I think it was about £2 million to help with the externalisation process. This council and the predecessor council, Bournemouth Borough Council, has been unable to fully support the Russell Coates Museum for the last 20 years because of the escalating costs and the repairs that need doing. I'm pleased to report that the externalisation process is going well. The charity, as it says in the report, so the charity commissioners have just done their piece of work, paving the way for a new sole trustee to take over the running of the museum. We currently are the only sole trustee, and therefore the externalisation process is on track. It now needs parliamentary approval in order to be laid before Parliament, and we're hopeful that we are on track for the vesting day of October the 1st. So that's really good news. This is something that's been in the offing or in the pipeline for a very long time, and it's a good news story that we're moving forward. The point about externalisation is this will allow the Russell Coates Museum to seek funding from a wide variety of sources. So that's the background. In the meantime, the building, the listed building continues to deteriorate. So I'm really grateful to Arts Council England for agreeing a £1.5 million grant. So that's MEND round 4 to do some urgent repairs, and these are the most urgent repairs. I won't go through them all, but they are listed in paragraph 6. And the match funding has been put forward from SIL, bit of SIL money, and some legacies. So I would like to pay tribute actually to the manager of the museum, Sarah Newman, and her team for incredible amount of hard work in terms of moving forward to externalisation, but also for the working conditions that they work under, given some of the major problems at the museum. So thank you to them for that. I think that's all I wanted to say. So I would ask colleagues to support recommendations A to C to approve our acceptance of that £1.5 million from Arts Council England. And I would like to, as I did last night actually, thank Arts Council England for their ongoing continued support, financially and otherwise, for all our cultural organisations, and particularly in this case, the Russell Coats. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, are there any councillors not on Cabinet wishing to speak on this item? No. Not seeing any indication. So Cabinet members, anything to say on this? It looks like we're all feeling pretty positive about it. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Just to echo really a lot of what Councillor Martin said. I think the Russell Coats is such a jewel in the crown for Bournemouth and for the conurbation. You know, I think it is quite understated in how unique and how beautiful it is, and it's really good to see them getting this level of funding for much needed repair work. And yeah, just to echo as well what Councillor Martin said around the manager of the museum, Sarah. You know, she's a real credit to both currently the council and when it eventually gets externalised fully. The Russell Coats, really passionate about the work she does, really passionate about the museum, and just really a great person. So very, very happy to second. Apologies for being slightly delayed to that seconding. Had a resident texting me, but yeah. Really fantastic and really good news story. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. I was just going to congratulate Councillor Martin for the work that he does on this, and he's always passionate about these things. But working with the Arts Council of England and keeping those relationships going is a really important thing. So thank you. It's a good piece of work.
Really getting worried now.
Okay, so can I take a vote on this item? The recommendations include a recommendation to council. So can I see all those in favour, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, so on to agenda item 10, which is the BCP complaint policy. Councillor Martin's going to be proposing this one. Can I see if we have someone to second, please? Thank you, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies to those of you who heard me say some of this last night. I'll try and be reasonably brief. Pleased to see that Matty, the Director of Customer and Property, is here, just in case I get into any difficulty with any difficult questions. And also Jane Potter, who is our Head of Business Management and Complaints, and quite a lot of other things, I think, Jane. So she's also on the call to help me out. Also actually like to thank Councillor Salmon again for a really good discussion on at scrutiny last night about this policy. There were lots of questions, lots of debate, and I know there's been some backwards and forwards today between a couple of members of scrutiny and Jane in terms of suggestions and tweaking and what have you. So thank you for that. It was very helpful. So just to say that obviously we all know that BCP is a large and complex organisation. Things don't always go as smoothly as we want, particularly in customer service delivery and complaints. And I think as ward members, as well as cabinet members, we'll all have our own experience of that. An effective complaints process demonstrates a number of things: a commitment to accountability, and we obviously like to think ourselves as an open and accountable council, and to listening, fostering trust amongst customers and stakeholders. And I did make this point last night, that I do think that building trust with our stakeholders and with our residents is one of the biggest challenges we have, because of the challenges that local government has in terms of finance, but also in terms of how this council came together 5 years ago or 6 years ago. So that's a really important point about how we deal with complaints and the effect that has on trust. And I think also it's about a commitment to improving what we do in terms of feedback from complaints and feedback from customers. And I believe, and again I said this last night, and it hasn't taken me very long to get stuck into the world of local government jargon, which I promised I would never do. I think it's called a customer improvement journey. Anyway, there we go. Anyway, so the report comes forward to us following recent revisions to the Local Government Ombudsman Complaints Handling Code, which aims to enhance efficiency, transparency and responsiveness in handling complaints. And these are all to be put in place by 2027. So the BCP Council Complaints Policy has been updated alongside a new policy on unreasonable actions. So there's a whole list of changes, and I'm just going to pick out one or two. A more simplified complaints process, stricter timeframes for acknowledging and responding to complaints, clear guidance for supporting vulnerable complainants, and that was a key issue that was discussed last night very helpfully. Enhanced transparency, regular audit and monitoring of performance, greater collaboration amongst complaint staff and across the organisations and other organisations to pick up learning, experience and good practice, greater use of technology, which obviously is very of the moment, clear explanations for unresolved complaints, and greater clarity over the distinction between complaints and service requests, which we talked about a bit last night, and that's really important. And finally, establishing a lead member role for the complaints process, which we will implement as soon as possible. So I'm assuming that might be me, but I don't know. So we shall see. So I think just to wrap that up, and I'd like to thank Jane for her extensive work on this and for the ongoing work. This is obviously an ongoing piece of work. So thank you, Jane, and to Matty and his team. So together our approach will ensure our customers' concerns and complaints are handled as professionally and promptly as possible. I hope. Thank you.
No, you know why we're being nice to you.
Pardon me?
No, you know why we're being nice.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
Just
you.
worked it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Right, so I'm going to see if anyone who isn't on Cabinet wishes to speak on this. I think at this point, I will invite Councillor Salmon back in because obviously this was considered at last night's Overview and Scrutiny Board. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Leader. And just, yes, very briefly, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any formal recommendations from the board on this, but as mentioned just now by Councillor Martin, the board welcomed this report and had a number of questions and comments for him and for the officers. Councillor Waite in particular made some very insightful comments and suggestions around improving and clarifying parts of the policy, and these have subsequently been picked up by officers for action. And I'd like to ask Councillor Martin, if I may, to maintain an overview of that feedback in the final stages of preparing these new policies for publication. The board briefly also discussed the role of councillors in relation to complaints, in particular in terms of us stepping into situations before they become formal complaints and the value that we all can and do add there. And we also discussed in particular the definition of vulnerable customers and the relationship between vulnerabilities and perceived unreasonable behaviour in the light of the new policy around that. And the need for a joined up approach with other parts of the council, for example, social services and other community partners, to ensure that we're always looking to offer full support to people when they're struggling to engage with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Salmon. Right, I think we'll go to Cabinet now. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I did listen to most of last night's ONS, but I'm afraid I ran out of time before it was time to go to bed to listen to this one because I was a bit delayed on time. The unreasonable actions policy, I suppose, for me, partly as councillors, we very often get issues once they've become a real problem to the individual, and they feel that they've not been listened to or that the council has been obstructive. And I am reminded of some councillors who are no longer councillors who would block certain people where I didn't feel the person was necessarily being unreasonable, and it was perhaps the councillor that was being unreasonable. And so I am worried that people who are passionate about topics maybe we use it as a shield when we shouldn't. And so I hope we've struck the right balance there. I guess it will take time to establish that, but we need to make sure that we are listening to those people who have really legitimate concerns. And I've got a case at the moment, somebody who feels that we, through our BCP Homes arm, have been representing a tenant and not them as a neighbour who's been putting up with some pretty obnoxious behaviour. And so I think we do need to be cautious about how we use our unreasonable policy. But equally, there are people who we know, and I'm sure we've all got a list of. I could list off a group of people who are very regular callers and which could easily probably fall into that category. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I also listened to last night's ONS board, and I have to say they really did scrutinise this complaints policy extremely thoroughly. So well done, Kate, and your board. And I am happy to support this because I think it sets out the complaints process very clearly. And what I was particularly pleased about is it includes training for staff, because this sort of, handling complaints is just not easy these days. And I think this will help our staff to better manage and cope with all the complaints and complainants that we have to deal with. So yeah, happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Leader. Could I first of all express appreciation to the authors of the policies for all their work on them. They're both extremely good, detailed policies and very much fit for purpose. So grateful to them for that. I was, when I first saw the policy, the complaints policy, interested in the definition of what is a complaint. And slightly wary that anything and everything could be interpreted as a complaint and could then eat into time in terms of managing those. But I'm pleased to see that there is the clear difference between a complaint and a request for service, as it's defined in inverted commas, or an inquiry about a service. And I think that is good to see. I would make two kind of general comments, though, about complaints and whether we get things right, whether we get things wrong. One is to recognize that there is no organization in the world that gets everything right. And inevitably things will happen from time to time, and complaints are fully justified, and it's right and proper that we have a complaints procedure to deal with those situations. And it's good to see that updated, improved, and I have no doubt we will deal with complaints much more effectively in the future. The other thing I would say is in terms of complaints and a slightly different interpretation of the word, which might be moans. And I draw a parallel, if I may, with the National Health Service, which I think we all know needs dramatic improvement. And there are waiting lists that are far too long. But I get the impression at the same time that when it comes to the general public, whilst there will be concerns about waiting times and things not happening as quickly as they would like, there is also an understanding that the National Health Service is underfunded, and there is sympathy to all those involved in the National Health Service, to the medics, the doctors, the nurses, the emergency services, that they are doing their best under all the circumstances. I wish there was the same perception about local government, which is equally grossly underfunded. And in spite of the fact that, yes, there will be fully appropriate complaints from time to time, which these policies will deal with, I wish that there was more understanding amongst the public of the fact that council officers are working extremely hard to provide a good service to residents in spite of the pressures that they are under caused by that lack of underfunding. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hannah. Right, I think we'll go back to Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just two things. One, I obviously can give Councillor Salmon the assurance that I will be working with Matty and Jane as this process goes forward. So please be assured on that. And the only other thing I would say in terms of customer service and complaints is that my mobile phone went off at 6:45 this morning, and a lady just, I won't say who she was, a lady of a certain age just rang me and said, gave me her name, her address, and said, I haven't had my copy of Yours magazine, can you sort it out? And I said, I think you've got the wrong number, I'm not the news agent. She said, oh yeah, sorry Andy. And she phoned me back 15 minutes later and said she still hadn't got her blue badge. So I could deal with that, but I couldn't deal with Yours magazine. But then that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your support on this.
Thank you. Right, so this is about adopting the policy. So can I please see all those cabinet members who are in favour of the recommendation? Thank you, that's unanimous. So we move towards the end of our agenda now. We have agenda item 11, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. Chief Executive, do you have anything to report?
None to report, Lyd.
Thank you. Agenda item 12 is the Cabinet Forward Plan. And of course, this is the penultimate item of our agenda. I can advise that the latest version of the Forward Plan has been published on the Council's website and shows what will be coming up and coming to Cabinet over the next few months and all the way up until pretty much the end of the year, and perhaps some beyond as well, especially as we have some items now which are on a very long delivery schedule. Agenda item 13 is the date of the next meeting. That's scheduled for Wednesday, the 18th of June at 10:15. And that actually brings our agenda to a close. So I'd like to thank everyone who has contributed today and formally close the meeting.